Hello everyone and welcome to Navigating Crossroads Conversations. This is a safe space for Black women to share crossroads that they've navigated, whether it's their life, their careers or well-being. This is our second episode and I'm delighted to have these amazing women here for another conversation. The feedback to our first podcast was so good that I've decided to come back again and have another conversation around a topic that I hope you will find very interesting and relatable. So, my name is Jacqueline. I'm the CEO of Communicate Inclusively. We are a consultancy and we help organisations to build inclusive workplace cultures. We also help underrepresented groups to have thriving careers in the workplace. So that's me. I'm going to move on to these amazing women that I have here. And firstly, thank you all for agreeing to take part. I know you're all amazing and it's going to be a great conversation. But if you can just introduce yourselves before we get into the topic today. Jacqueline, can we start with you?
Hi, my name's Jacqueline. I'm the CEO of Empathy Souls. We're the voice of the marginalised community, and essentially we take whatever scenario the community is struggling with and we provide a solution. And we do this by doing workshops, different activities, and we're here, we're available.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. It's a pleasure to have you here today. Michelle, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Yes, so my name is Michelle Alexander and I'm a family life coach. I actually founded a company called AK Life Coaching. We specialise in family support, early intervention and also life coaching in the workspace. We specialise in working with people and employees who are really interested in carers in particular. But I also have a couple of other hats. One is I am Remarkable Facilitator, which is a Google initiative, and I'm also a Citizen Tribunal member. And then I also work for early intervention, social care, so a number of roles, but I love them each equally.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. It's great to hear about all the things you do, Michelle. Zainab, last but not least.
Hello, I'm Zainab and I have about 20 years experience in consulting and financial services. I'm also a trustee for the Women's Prize Trust, covering fiction and non-fiction, and also a governor at a primary school.
Amazing. Thank you all. So much expertise here. I'm delighted to have you all. So let's move, I guess, into the topic and to say this is a safe space, very relaxed, informal, and we're here to share some of the things that we've experienced and hopefully inspire the people who are listening to us to maybe take on board some of the things that we've experienced to help them in their careers, in their lives, and with their well-being. So if this conversation does resonate with you, I have a membership of Black women called The Collective, and I'll leave the information in the notes, but if you want to continue, I guess, having this safe space like this, do please check it out because it'd be wonderful to welcome some more women into that space. But today's conversation is focused on confidence, visibility, and owning your voice. These are topics that I've heard from the women that I've been working with over the last few years through Navigating Crossroads, our live event and our webinars, that keeps coming up as topics and themes that Black women struggle with. And so I thought it'd be a great conversation to have today. You know, many women may feel that they are overlooked or underestimated and their confidence is eroded through negative experiences in the workplace. There could be uncertainty around visibility, you know, how can I be authentic? How can I focus on my personal brand and what does that mean? But also many women are holding themselves back. They are not necessarily standing in their purpose and this could be due to external factors, and so we're going to be touching on those things and many others today. So let's start the first question on this topic and it's going to go to Zainab, if that's okay. We're going to talk about owning your voice. So, Zainab, when did you start to truly own your voice and what helped you to get there?
First of all, Alan, thank you so much for this opportunity, and this is a topic I could talk about forever. When I joined my last organisation, which was a retail bank, I had a director who said to me that you have lots of good ideas, but you never say them in the meeting. Mm-hmm. You wait till after the meeting and then you go and have a chat with the team and say, this is what you should do. And she's like, why do you do that? Like, you know, why don't you speak up and let people know whose idea it is? And she was right. You know, I don't know whether it was the attention or the nervousness or the fact that often other people would take your idea as their own. And so there was just this reticence about, I'll just do the work and you'll get notice and I'll move on. But anybody knows in corporate life, that's not how it works. And so that just put that seed, that kernel in my head that no, you need to own your ideas. You need to own what you are capable of and be, I guess, slightly unapologetic about it. And it wasn't smooth sailing. There were some challenges. There were some, false steps and starts. But slowly, when people get that positive affirmation of that's a good idea, let's do that. And if you fail, I'm very open to own it. That didn't go so well. Let's pivot. Let's try again. And that built the confidence to continue. And I have to say, I've never looked back.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, Zainab. I want to ask you a bit more about that, because I found that, I have a voice, but sometimes it's a case of using the right voice in the right settings. I'm naturally quite a direct person. That hasn't always served me well, in terms of sometimes being too direct, and people are not always ready to receive that information. Have you had to deal with that at all? Or how have you found the right voice at the right time?
So I often believe that you need to sometimes meet people where they're at. And you have to find the thing that works for them and is important to them. For some people, it's their ego. You're so bright. I really need you to do this because I think this will look good for you. And sometimes people just it's for your team. It will mean less work, quicker deliverables. They can go home earlier. It's really just trying to find the issues sometimes you're trying to solve for some people. And some people, you can never meet them where they're at. They're never going to want to listen to you. I'm a big believer in kindness, that, you should really try and treat people with kindness and respect. But some people will not meet you there. And so I do say to my kids sometimes, your mother is kind, but she's not nice. And so sometimes you do have to have the hard conversations. But, I always try and do it with kindness. I think also you have to be very firm to know who you are, to have some integrity. So when you have those hard conversations, that needn't have to be hard conversations. You're very clear in terms of what it is that you're trying to achieve and what you're here for. I don't believe in that. People say, I'm not here to make friends. No, you can make a friend. We can be good. But, we need to be clear about objective and what it is I'm saying. If you don't understand, I can explain. If there's a challenge, we can work through this. But please, hopefully come with the capacity and ability to hear me and to receive what I'm trying to give you. Assume positive intent. I think that's something that people really, really need to focus on. And also, don't have a scarcity mindset. Think in abundance and, we can achieve this together. And, if you want to say you did this, if that's what's going to be, we got it done and we did it. And, we're all, the vibes were good. That is what is really critical.
Thank you, Zainab. I find that really helpful. Michelle, please, jump in.
I mean, every time I hear this conversation, I think about how, from the lens of our childhood, and how that makes shows us how we're going to possibly show up in the workplace, and how sometimes we're wrestling with kind of narratives in our minds from things or institutions or so on who have led to us not being as confident in that space, and actually to work through that and find out what voice is ours and what voice is not, and then align that with our values is really crucial. So it's something that I really resonated when you talked about that.
And I think you make a very good point in terms of the things that you bring, the baggage that you bring, and sometimes you just put that down. You are not your feelings. Your feelings are valid. You can feel annoyed, you can feel frustrated, but you need to be able to manage them in order to communicate clearly. And maybe you can't in the moment. Maybe you need to take a step back and say, okay, maybe we need to bring this meeting to an end, and I'll come back to you and we'll regroup. And maybe some things don't need to be a meeting, they could be an email. Just a dispassionate, don't press send, delete the to button, maybe write that angry email, then scale it back, and then write it again. And also, I think, there are things I always tell people when I mentor them. You can't gauge tone in email. You might be bringing something that someone says and putting your tone, that doesn't exist. So maybe if you feel the tone's not quite right, call them. You know, I think, you know, because of COVID, people just think, oh, everything has to be, no, call them. And then you can gauge the tone.
Yes.
Maybe put a Zoom call so you can see someone's face.
Yes.
But you really need to be able to know, okay, this is my baggage. I'm going to park it. That person's experience, it's not my experience. Everybody's story is unique. Everybody's path is unique.
Yeah.
But assume positive
absolutely.
intent and be kind.
You've shared so much there. Just to unpack it, because I feel like for me, I'm just seeing a lot of what you're saying is so relevant. And I think one of the things that I try to do is to understand where that person is coming from, like you just said. Because I think that's a skill. When people talk to me about, I was in a meeting, I shared that idea, no one liked it. A couple of weeks later, someone else presented it and they liked it. Or having issues with my team, you know, they're not listening to me, they're not taking what I'm saying. And then when they play it back, I'm like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but maybe you could try this track. And I think sometimes the practical advice can be really helpful. So in addition to what you've said, I do think now with AI, sometimes I'll put the scenario in. I'll write the scenario and say, I want to say this, or I want to write this email, it's going to this kind of person, this is the backstory, and it takes away the baggage, because sometimes it's hard to see your baggage. Sometimes. Even occasionally what I'll do is I will paste in the reply to an email and say, how do you think I should reply to this? Because sometimes you've got so many layers of what you're thinking about, the history of the conversation, your relationship with that person. But equally, I do agree with the calls and the Zoom. I think I can read people quite well, get a sense of who they are, but also I think I'm really good at, I guess, getting comfortable, that spend time building relationships in the beginning. How are you? How are your kids? Oh, how was that holiday you went on? All that stuff is so important, and building a rapport with somebody before you dive in to what the raw piece of, you know, the information that you want to share, right?
And that's the thing,
sorry, go ahead,
in terms of empathy. At Empathy Souls, that's always at the forefront. So whoever we're dealing with, what is your lived experience and expertise that you're coming with? And, you know, when you find challenging situations, is it really a challenge, or is it that you're not listening to each other? Have that opportunity to actively listen and understand, oh, this person's just trying to put forward an idea. Okay, if this is the idea, I'm going to listen to this and I'm going to reflect on it. Not immediately think I have to respond and react, because that person's first reaction isn't necessarily the honest and truthful one.
Yeah, get those barriers to go down 100%. Thank you, Jacqueline. I'm going to come to you for question 2. So I think that was a great conversation, though, but let's move on in the interest of time. So, Jacqueline, have you ever held yourself back from being visible, and what shifted for you?
I've worked about 30 or 40 years in central government or local government, and I've worked with the top tier, most vulnerable families. And so I've spent a lot of time doing strength-based work, where I go in, and although you have this label as being a dysfunctional or troubled family, actually there has to be some strengths, because you're still here, your family still survive, and maybe there's been a little glitch that you actually just need support with. And so when I did that sort of work, I was very much focused outside, looking at the strengths of the people I was working with. And then, unfortunately, I became very ill, and I was diagnosed with cancer. That was in 2016. And that made me really sit still, really look at the organisation I worked for, looked at what is my role in society. And although I've had lots of feedbacks from clients, you know, this lady's very different to everyone else, it wasn't enough for me to just do one thing at a time. I realised there was a process to it. And my underlying process was on empathy.
Right.
The skill that I have, that everyone thinks is a secret, is that I'm empathetic.
Right.
I'm able to park my lived experience at the door, and I'm able to come in and say, you tell me about you. But most practitioners struggle with this. You know, within the social care and NHS environments, in housing, they don't have any empathy. And so hence why there's a lot of burnout, there's a lot of absenteeism from work, And they don't understand why. But it's purely because they're not taking on board, this isn't my issue. I'm not trying to solve me. I'm actually the person outside who was the bridge. You know, so where I began to stand up is where I opened my own organisation. And whenever I describe it, it sounds very huge. What do you actually do, Jackie? What I actually do is I create a psychological space and I support you to resolve the issue that you have, which sometimes may be you're in the wrong organisation. This organisation doesn't respect what you have. And so it takes me way back to, do you know who you are? All of us like to say, I know who I am, but I could ask each of you, how do you like your eggs done? And you'd stop and go, actually, my kids like it this way, so over the years I've adopted this. No, invest in yourself into finding out who you are, because who you are and who you show up as matters. It matters to the rooms that you go into. Who's going to be attracted to you? You know, they're going to be attracted to what you deliver. And so for me, the switch was ill health. But for me, my mission is to ensure that no other black woman has to get ill before she realises her true worth.
Right.
So we start with understand yourself. Invest the time in who you are and show up as who you are. If people don't like you, they just don't like you. You know, I often say I'm a bit like Mama. You love me, but you hate me. You know, most people won't hate me because I'm empathetic. There's the secret, empathy.
Jacqueline, you unpacked so much there, and you have a very positive outlook. Obviously having gone through cancer, you know, and you know, I'm sorry to hear that. But you seem to have taken strength from that, and in terms of knowing yourself and what's important to you and who you are. I just wonder, in terms of your work, if you're focused on the other person so much and being empathetic to them, does that still allow you to be visible? And where does the balance sit with that?
So the empathy starts with myself.
Right, okay.
The empathy had to start with myself. My grandmother would say to me, be yourself from a very young age. But the truth is, as an adult, you then have to ask yourself that question, who am I? And who I am is a very talented individual that can work with all client groups and will empower that. I don't want to act on anyone's behalf. I want to bring out of them exactly those strengths. Because it will be that maybe that grandmother didn't exist in your household who said, be yourself. Because in our communities, we have a lot of parables, a lot of stories that we don't understand. You know, we hear some things that are said that, what does that really mean? So I'm not ashamed to make myself visible. I'm not ashamed to share my stories, which we don't have enough time to share today. But they're very vast and very rich. And that lived experience will always walk with me. So it doesn't matter whether I'm talking to the Queen or King, or whether I'm talking to the homeless person on the street. The conversation is exactly the same. You know, and this is what people forget. They forget that they're the foundation. What they have to say is important. And just being allowed to be heard. Give yourself permission to use your own terms, your own languages. If it doesn't fit in that room, that's not your room. As an ambassador for the Eve Appeal, I sat with millionaires just telling them my story. I was overwhelmed when 300 people came to me to say, wow, that was really powerful. And I was like, yeah, it is, because it's my lived experience that I now want you to promote in the world and fund and ensure that people don't have to have my same experience. So your hardest time in life is your actual asset. You know, it doesn't matter if you've been an ex-convict and, you know, you've struggled to make your life path meaningful. Just telling another convict that story or telling a room of funders that story is important. It's valuable. Each one of us has a unique story to sell. And that's what we've got to hold on dear to, because that's what encourages you to be visible.
It does, Jacqueline. You make it sound so easy, but I feel like society puts a lot of shame on us. And I guess all of us can think about the thing like, oh, I don't want to know about that. And I used to have that around being a single parent. And I guess, you know, due to society saying that, you know, black women are single parents and things like that, I don't want to work to know that. You know, I'd say, oh, I've been married, but I'm divorced. You know, like almost trying to justify the state. So I hear what you're saying, and I really feel like it's a journey to lose the baggage and the shame for some of the stories that we have. But you're right. When you own the story and you tell it in your own words, it is so powerful.
That's why what you're doing today is powerful. Because the shame is the story we've created. The actual experience we've gone through is the diamond.
Right.
Because me knowing that about you, I might approach you and say, yeah, I'm a single parent. How have you got through this? Actually, you've got through better than those who are in a stable couple relationship. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Without the grit, you can't carve the oyster.
No,
So
exactly.
you really can't. And I think you have to be, I think one of the things I tell people, like, you have to be really self-aware. You need to know what your limitations are, what your strengths are. You know, when you do the end of year feedback and they go work on your weaknesses, I'm like, do you have to? Because you have so many things that you can leverage and build on and do that maybe the weaknesses are just, you know, like, do you have one eye that sees better than the other? And you know, you're going to say to them, go to the doctor and fix it.
Exactly.
You know, I think there is that thing of, you know, you really need to really know who you are, look in the mirror, do I like that person? You know, and I think also, you know, I'm a big believer in therapy. And one thing my therapist say to me is like, I'll tell her all the things I hadn't done. And she's like, but what have you done?
Right.
So you need to reframe the narrative.
Yes.
You're not a single parent. You are a person raising a child by yourself.
Yeah.
You know, you know, it's really about, you know, reframing it, not necessarily in positive, you know, but it is what you are doing. You are providing for someone, you are caring for someone, and you just happen to be doing it by yourself. And you are doing, like, you know, whenever I talk to friends who are, you know, doing it by themselves, I'm like, I do. Even with this husband of mine, like, you know, I love him. It's hard. But you're doing it solo, like, you know, I want to bring out the pom-poms. So it is such a massive achievement. Like, you almost put it on your CV. I am.
And this is what you're talking about. Maybe in our community, we don't celebrate our strengths enough. Like, straight away you said to me, oh, Jackie, you're really positive. I'm not positive. I do what you do. I celebrate the stuff I can celebrate. You know, the other stuff, you might ask me another question and I'll go, okay, this is the truth about this. But it's the celebration of our achievements.
Okay, I've got food for thought here around the visibility piece. Yeah, my brain's going. But I love it. Thank you so much for sharing, both of you. Really a lot of helpful insights there. Okay, so who's next on the list? I have Michelle. So this question's for you, and we've touched on confidence already, but I guess we want to go a bit deeper into it. So what does confidence look like for you now versus earlier in your career?
Well, I want to say that my journey has been very different, a bit like you. I was a single young mum, and I decided to change my career to fit in with my childcare situations and so on. But actually, the big thing about my journey is that actually people saw my strengths when I didn't even see them myself. I was really labelled from a young age as quite a shy child, and I've realised that I was never shy. It was just I was shy compared to my sister. So that's a very different thing. So actually, in terms of confidence, as I've got older now, I've realised that actually there's a very different, there's a big difference between confidence and competence and confidence. And actually, there's lots of things when you're doing things like you suggested, writing down lists and actually gathering that information. There's lots of factual information that shows that actually I'm doing a good job and I've done things against all the odds. So when I'm working with families and people, there's a lot of work that we need to do around, you know, what is fact, what is emotion, and what is a problem here. Because actually when we unpick this, we can really demonstrate actually these are facts and these are some of these things that are institutional. Sometimes we might need to write letters, we might need to go through a formal process, but some of this is emotional. And where does that come from? How can we support each other, whether that's in peer groups and whether some companies may have some networks that will really strengthen that, or it might be actually we need to do some inner work, like you were saying about, you know, therapy and so on. But also really sit down with what aligns with my morals, you know, what are my values. So when I'm confident the most, when I really am in spaces that align with my morals, that I'm doing good work, that I can honestly say that the work I'm putting in, no matter how many hours, because I do work quite a lot, I would say, but when I'm doing the most good and fulfilling work, it doesn't feel like work. And that's what makes me confident, because I know that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And like today, like I feel like I'm supposed to be here because we've met ourselves in different paths, in different guises, and all of a sudden we're here today. And I always believe in this theme around there's no room you're not supposed to be in. And actually, if you're in this space, and I be like yourself, I've been to many meetings with billionaires, millionaires, you know, people of government. And actually, when I'm in that room, I think about, like you said, about the ancestors and why am I in that room against anybody else? What am I supposed to be bringing back to my community that can actually further them on, who can tell them a story, which actually we are a culture actually that sometimes there is some negative and stereotypes about therapy and so on. But actually, when we convey it in a story, there's something that just clicks with people and actually can move them on. And I always think about that we should be teaching people to fish, not giving them a fish. And actually, how can we do that in terms of confidence? How can we do that in terms of expressing that they need to be in that room to further the conversation? And, you know, like we are doing today, we're furthering that conversation so that if somebody listens to this podcast today, they can say that, you know, this person's had challenges, but they've still rise above it. And actually, it's not about where you start, it's about where you finish. But not only that, it's about who have you brought along with you. And I can honestly say that the people that I've worked with and the people who've been in my presence have grown, and that's what I want to do, is help. I get confidence from knowing that other people are growing as well as me, and it's not a selfish thing, because I do think about my legacy. I do think about how can I further the next generation, the challenges that people are going through that as a single parent I never went through, to be quite honest, because the situations and systems were slightly different. So, and actually helping people to know that they're exactly where they are at this point, that everybody has a season, so don't judge themselves based on the season that they're in, because, you know, my daughter's older now. Actually, the things that I can do in the community and the kind of things that I can do, actually is because I've got time. My daughter's older. When she was a few years younger, I had to be, you know, locally and be there so that I can be there more present in that sense. So I think that confidence for me is really owning who I am as a person and knowing that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, Michelle, there's a lot there, and I really appreciate you sharing all of that and some of your personal experiences. What I would say is that when you're in a season where you're feeling not confident, how do you navigate that? Because, so the women that I've spoken to, many of them have been confident, or they were confident, and then something knocks it. And it can take sometimes a while to get that confidence back. So, as you say, we're all in different seasons, but not every season's going to be good. And so how can you, I guess, bet on yourself and be prepared for that? Because it's going to happen.
Absolutely.
Life is not a straight line. How can we prepare for that time when perhaps things are not going well and it does erode our confidence, so that it doesn't take us such a long time
Time,
to
yeah.
rebuild it, or not to knock it at all. Like you can accept that situation
Yeah.
and still feel confident in yourself.
A lot of the work that I do as a coach is around failing forward.
Right, okay.
And really thinking about, actually, we know these things are going to happen. And I always think about it like having your own fire drill. Like, and I always think about myself in the circle. And actually, there are going to be things that happen in your life. And who can I reach out to? Who are your resources? And it can be financial resources, it can be human resources that I can go to in times of trouble. So I've got a mentor, I've got friends, I've got people that I can just actually, like even the other day I spoke to a lady called Audrey, and I was speaking to her and I was like, am I being unrealistic about this situation, because I'm struggling with my values around this particular topic? And she was like, no, Michelle, you're absolutely right. So I think it's having a board of your own board of a board around you you can collectively, you can go to, and actually know that one person for that may not be the person you go to for another topic, because in the work that I do, a lot of the time people are quite comfortable with going to a person who they're not the specialists at that, and they're going to just tell you what you want to hear. So it's actually having that in advance, and I do it in, like I said, in a circle, so I have myself around them and various different topics. And if these things were to arise, who would I go to? So you've got it in advance, so that actually they're the best person, like you ladies here. Now that I know what you do, if I've got a problem in a particular subject, I'll say, well, actually, I'm going to go to, to one of you for that particular topic, because you're the expert.
Yeah.
And actually, people always often say to me, how do I get things done so quickly when I'm helping people? Because I know who to go to for particular things.
Exactly.
And I think that's the problem that some people
it.
face.
Thank you, Michelle, for that. You covered a lot around confidence, and I can see the journey that you've been on, but also I think what's amazing is that you're sharing really good insights with other people and bringing others along the way in terms of confidence. So thank you for sharing all of that. So we're going to move on to our final question now for everyone to answer this one. And I think we will start with you, Zainab. And so we have shared a lot already, and I guess this kind of really wraps it all up. So if there was a woman who was ready to be seen, but she was still feeling slightly unsure about it, what would you recommend to her?
Do it. This is not a rehearsal. You've only got, and life is full of what we say regrets about things you haven't done as opposed to things that you did do. So just do it. Whatever it is, if it doesn't work out, it's a learning. It's and progress is not linear. You'll have steps forward and back. God knows, when you look at the world today, it's really not linear. But really, the only thing that's stopping you is yourself. Resources willing. And I think what hold people back is what they think what other people are doing.
Yes.
And comparison really is the thief of joy.
Absolutely.
So just do it. If you don't do it today, do it tomorrow. Get it again. And if tomorrow you don't get it all done, try again tomorrow. And make sure you have, as you said, your board, got your cheerleaders behind you. You have people who are going to hold you accountable.
Yes.
Make sure you have an accountability buddy.
Absolutely.
But do it.
Yeah,
Just do it.
thank you. Yeah, just get it done. I hear that. What about you, Jacqueline? For a lady who feels like she's ready to be seen and be visible, but she's still uncertain. I want to pick up on one other thing. I don't know if you can help with this, but in terms of having your cheerleaders around you, some people struggle to find cheerleaders. So I don't know if anyone's got any input on that, but Jacqueline, what would you recommend?
So be honest with yourself. Take that time to look in the mirror. Assess where you're really at. Create the awareness of who you are. Then, once you've assessed yourself, really sit down and say, okay, I know I'm suffering with a bit of imposter syndrome right now. I'm not the expert in the room. I haven't done that qualification, but I've got a lot to give. So accept who you are in that very moment. And then my final A, it's a AAA system, is take action. As you rightly said, just do it. What is the worst that's going to happen? Going back to my great-granny, my granny would say, nobody died. You're not going to die in the process of taking that visibility step. Just do it. My business partner always laughs because I say there's 10 kebab shops, but I only ever use one. But that's my own personal preference. understand what your personal preference is and follow it. It's a journey, not a destination. You know, you can go viral today and get cancelled tomorrow. What you're going to live with was the viral. You're going to go, wow, that was great. So I said something a bit challenging and the world isn't happy with me, but do you know what? There's your visibility. It's how you respond after that. There's no right or wrong. There's just your unique response, which relies on you knowing yourself. So keep at it. Use the AAA. Awareness, acceptance, action.
Nice, AAA. Thank you so much. And just to pick on both of you said just to do it. And again, just from a practical perspective, that doing doesn't need to mean that you're going to be out there.
Yeah.
It could be a small step in the right direction every day. That's what I do. I'm like, I'm going to do, this is the goal. I'm going to do something today to work towards that. And so doing it doesn't mean you've got to do the whole do. It's taking a step towards your goal, but the awareness of what that goal is and taking steps
Can I give a
towards
slight
it.
nuance to that?
Yeah.
Look at the goal and work backwards.
Right.
Absolutely.
Don't work towards it. Here's a bigger picture. I'm going to be on a podcast with 3 amazing women and we're all going to be fantastic, saying exactly the same thing from our own perspective. How do I get there?
Yeah. Okay.
This is the goal. Walk away from it.
Yeah.
I like it. Thank you so
And then
much.
I will also just add that not every day is going to feel like Christmas.
No.
Yeah, like, you know, but after you've done it, like my husband says something like, you know, there's type 1 fun. There's fun, you're enjoying it when you're doing it.
Yes.
There's the type 2 fun. You didn't enjoy it, but once it's done, you're like, yay, I've done it. You know, so they're different parts of the journey. And sometimes you just have to grit your teeth, you know, going to the bank manager to get that loan, calling that a person who might be a bit rude, but you might need something, you know, you need their friend to help you.
Yeah.
They're going to be tricky bits.
Yeah.
But when you get there, oh, it's going to be so
Exactly,
sweet.
and enjoy that moment, right?
Yeah.
Relish it, exactly. The last piece around advice to the woman who feels like she's ready to be seen, but she's a little bit hesitant still. What would you say, Michelle, to her?
I feel like sometimes we have to enjoy the moment that we're in. You know, like sometimes we're always chasing. And actually, I remember one of my really successful friends said to me, Michelle, I wish I was in the space that you were in now, because I can make loads of mistakes without it being so noticeable. And actually, it made me realise that as soon as I was a lot busier, I was like, oh, actually, I wish I had a few more moments to do other things. So I think that we have to recognise that actually we are in the space that we're supposed to be in at this moment, but also plan for the future. What do we want it to look like? But I always think about this in terms of being visible, that we have to be honest with ourselves about what does visibility look like for you, because what visibility is for you might be completely different too. And that's where the rub comes, because people think that they have to be visible like somebody that they see on social media that isn't their personality type and so on. So actually, really, when you're thinking about visibility, it's looking for people who you kind of align with and like quite a role model for you, and then think about what kind of steps they're using, as opposed to going too far in another direction, which actually is going to make you feel uncomfortable. But also, I think that, like you ladies were saying, having cheerleaders as well, who are actually going to, and accountability partners and people like that, who are going to really push you forward, even when you feel a bit shaky, isn't it? What's that saying? Like, you know, go for it, and even when your voice shakes, like speak when your voice shakes. And I think that's a key point as well. Actually, sometimes the new step doesn't feel comfortable at the moment. It doesn't feel familiar, and doesn't mean that it's wrong for you.
It's the growth. That's where the growth is happening. 100%. Yeah, I agree with that. And that was some great advice there. One other thing, I guess, with regards to, you know, having your voice is, and finding cheerleaders, is that for me, my slogan for this year is ask boldly. And quite often I'd have a question or an ask or a request, and I feel bad. I feel like, I don't want to have to ask that person for that. But now I'm asking anyone and everything, and it's just given me so many amazing things. And I feel like we do hold back from asking, feeling like I don't want to feel like I'm begging for something, or they might say no. They might say no, but you haven't lost anything because you never had it in the beginning. But you know what? So many doors have opened, and so about the cheerleaders. If you need a cheerleader, sometimes ask someone
Absolutely.
to be your cheerleader.
Definitely,
Definitely. I love that.
definitely.
And so I guess that would be my tip to the lady who is thinking about being visible but is uncertain. Whatever you're uncertain about, ask for help, because there are so many experts out there. Like you amazing ladies. So that was the last question. I want to thank you so much. I feel like we could chat for so much longer on many more topics. And, I'd love to obviously reach out to you in future and have some future engagements with you. I hope you found it beneficial as well. Thank you for joining us. As I said, there are some other resources we have available through Navigating Crossroads. I'll put the website in the show notes. And also, if you're wanting continued support, please take a look at the collective. We'd love to have you as a member. And I guess one last thing, we have our 2026 Navigating Crossroads event on the 28th of November. Look out for more information on that coming soon. But thank you for joining us, and look out for the next podcast coming soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Yeah.